The familiar chime of the doorbell sliced through the comfortable silence of my Tuesday afternoon. I was in my armchair, a well-loved copy of a historical novel resting in my lap, a cup of Earl Grey tea steaming on the side table. At 72, my Tuesdays had a certain rhythm, a gentle predictability I'd come to cherish. This particular Tuesday, however, was about to rewrite the entire score of my life. I shuffled to the door, my knees offering their usual, creaky commentary, and pulled it open. The sight on my porch never failed to warm a deep, fundamental part of my soul. There stood my daughter, Sarah, her smile a little tired but genuine, and beside her, my grandson, Leo. "Grandma Eleanor," Leo chirped, his 8-year-old voice full of sunshine. He launched himself at me for a hug, his small arms wrapping tightly around my waist. He smelled of fresh air and the faint, sweet scent of the grape juice he'd probably had in the car. "Well, hello, you two. This is a wonderful surprise," I said, kissing the top of Leo's head and then Sarah's cheek. I wasn't expecting a visit until the weekend. Sarah stepped inside, dropping her oversized purse by the door. "I know, Mom, sorry for the drop-in. Leo was just really adamant about seeing you today. He said it was important." I looked down at Leo, who was already toeing off his sneakers with practiced efficiency. "Important, huh? Did you finish that big Lego spaceship you were telling me about? Do you need my expert help?" I winked. My expert help usually consisted of pouring the pieces out of the box and offering moral support. Leo shook his head, his sandy brown hair flopping. "Nope, it's something else." Something in his tone, a rare seriousness underpinning his youthful exuberance, gave me pause. But it was fleeting. He was 8. Important things could range from a lost action figure to a new video game level. "Well, I'm glad you're here," I said, ushering them further into the living room. "I just put the kettle on. Sarah, can I get you some tea?" "I'd love some, Mom, but I can't stay long," she said, a slightly apologetic look on her face. "I've got a conference call in 45 minutes. Is it okay if Leo hangs out with you for a couple of hours?" "I'll come right back after the call." "Of course. You know I always love having him." I felt a little thrill. An unexpected, solo visit with my grandson was a treat. I thought he just wanted to visit his grandma, to raid my cookie jar and maybe talk me into watching one of his animated movies. It was a simple, beautiful assumption. Sarah gave me another quick hug. "You're a lifesaver. Be good for Grandma, Leo." She kissed his forehead and was out the door with a wave, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. The house settled back into silence, but it was a different kind of quiet now, charged with Leo's presence. He stood in the middle of the living room, not making a beeline for the TV or the toy chest as he usually did. Instead, his eyes scanned the room, landing on the wall of framed photographs behind the sofa. "Can we look at the pictures, Grandma?" he asked. "Of course, sweetheart." I moved to stand beside him, my tea forgotten. This was our ritual. The wall was a timeline of our family. There was Sarah's graduation photo, beaming in her cap and gown. My late husband, Frank, and me on our 40th anniversary, his arm around me, both of our faces crinkled with joy. And there, in a place of honor, was my favorite picture of me and Leo. He was about 3, sitting on my lap on this very sofa, both of us lost in a fit of giggles over a silly picture book. But Leo's gaze wasn't on those. He was focused on an older, black and white photo in a simple silver frame. It was a picture of a young man in a crisp army uniform, his hat tilted at a slight, confident angle, his smile bright but his eyes holding a depth that belied his years. "That's great Grandpa Frank," I said softly, the words feeling both heavy and light on my tongue. "Before we were married, before he shipped out." "He looks brave," Leo stated, not a question, but a fact. "He was," I said, my heart giving its familiar, bittersweet squeeze. "Very brave." We stood there for a few minutes, me lost in the tide of memory, Leo seemingly studying every detail of the photograph. I remembered the day that picture was taken, the mix of pride and terror I'd felt, the way Frank had held my hands and promised me he'd come back. And he had. He'd come back, we'd built a life, raised a daughter, and he'd been my rock for 45 years until cancer, an enemy he couldn't fight, had taken him 5 years ago. "Grandma," Leo said, his voice pulling me back to the present. "Can we go to the park? The one with the big oak tree?" Another simple request. Another piece of the puzzle I wasn't yet assembling. "That sounds lovely, Leo. Let me just get my sweater." The park was only 2 blocks away, a small, green oasis in our neighborhood. The big oak tree was legendary, a gnarled, ancient giant whose branches created a cathedral of shade. It was where Frank and I had brought Sarah to play, where we'd pushed her on the swings. It was where I now sometimes came alone, just to sit and feel close to him. We walked hand in hand, Leo swinging our clasped hands between us. He was unusually quiet, his brow furrowed in thought. I chattered about inconsequential things, the new flowers blooming in Mrs. Henderson's garden, the particularly plump squirrel scolding us from a fence post. He listened, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. We reached the park and headed straight for the oak tree. Leo scrambled onto our favorite bench, the one dedicated to the memory of a local teacher, and patted the space beside him. I sat down, the cool, painted wood a familiar sensation through my slacks. The afternoon sun dappled through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on the ground. It was peaceful. I took a deep breath, expecting Leo to ask if I had any snacks in my purse or if he could go on the slide. Instead, he turned to me, his small body angled toward mine, his expression so earnest it made my breath catch. He looked directly into my eyes, his own a mirror of his mother's, and my Frank's, and asked the question that would change everything. "Grandma," he began, his voice clear and steady, "how did you know that great-grandpa Frank was the one you were supposed to love forever?" The world didn't stop spinning. The birds didn't cease their chirping. But for me, in that moment, everything went profoundly, utterly still. I felt as if I'd been gently but firmly lifted out of my own life and placed into a different one. I stared at my grandson, this little boy who was usually concerned with Pokemon cards and the maximum height of his Lego towers, and I saw a depth in him I had never noticed before. "Oh, Leo," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. That's a very big question." He nodded, his seriousness unwavering. "I know, but I need to know. How did you know?" I looked away from his intense gaze, out across the park, seeing not the swings or the picnic tables, but the ghost of my own youth. Where to even begin? How do you explain the mystery and certainty of a lifelong love to an 8-year-old? "Well," I started, my mind scrambling for a foothold. It wasn't one single moment. It was a collection of moments. Like pieces of a puzzle coming together. "Tell me the pieces," he said, tucking his feet up underneath him, settling in for a story. He wasn't asking for a simple answer, he was asking for the whole story. And so, I began. I told him about the first time I met Frank. It was at a high school dance in 1965. I was a nervous 16-year-old, standing with my girlfriends, pretending I wasn't hoping someone would ask me to dance. He was 17, tall and a little lanky, with a smile that seemed to take up his whole face. He wasn't the best dancer, I explained to Leo, but he had rhythm and he laughed when he stepped on my toes, and instead of being embarrassed, I found myself laughing with him. The first piece, I said, was that he made me laugh. And not just a polite laugh. A real, from-the-belly laugh. When you're with someone who can make you laugh, even when things are hard, that's a very important piece. Leo listened, rapt. What was the next piece? I told him about the time, a few months later, when my cat, Whiskers, had gotten very sick. I was heartbroken. Frank came over and didn't try to give me advice or tell me it would be okay. He just sat with me on the porch swing, his arm around me, and let me cry. He didn't say a word for almost an hour. He was just there. That was another piece, I said, feeling the old grief for that long-gone pet mixed with a fresh wave of love for the boy who had comforted me. I knew he was kind. And that his kindness wasn't just for show. It was a quiet, steady kindness. He was a safe place to be sad. We talked as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I told him more pieces. I told him about the way Frank's eyes lit up when he talked about fixing car engines, a passion I didn't understand but loved because of the joy it gave him. I told him about the fierce, protective way he stood up for his younger sister when a bully at school was picking on her. I told him about the way he remembered little things, my favorite flower, lilies, the way I took my coffee, with 2 sugars and a splash of milk, the song that always made me tap my feet, Stand By Me, by Ben E. King. It was like, I searched for the right words, wanting him to understand. It was like my heart, which had been a messy, noisy room, suddenly became quiet and organized whenever he was around. He felt like home. Leo processed this, his small face a mask of concentration. "So, it's not about them being the handsomest or the strongest." "Oh, goodness, no," I chuckled. "Those things can be nice, sure. But they fade. The kindness, the laughter, the feeling of being home, that's what builds the forever." He was quiet for a long time, watching a ladybug crawl across the back of the bench. I let the silence sit between us, comfortable and full. I was marveling at this child, at the profound question he had asked. Why now? Why this? Finally, he looked up at me again, his eyes now shimmering with a vulnerability that made my grandmotherly instincts kick into high gear. Grandma, he said, his voice softer now, a little hesitant. There's this girl in my class. Her name is Chloe, and there it was. The reason for the unexpected visit. The intense focus on the photograph. The urgent need to come to this park, to this bench. My heart swelled with a tenderness so immense it felt like it might lift me right off the bench. My 8-year-old grandson was in love. Or what passes for love when you're 8 and your world is made of schoolyards and lunchboxes? Tell me about Chloe, I said, keeping my voice gentle and non-judgmental. The words tumbled out of him then, a rushing, joyful stream. Chloe had red hair and freckles. She was the fastest runner in the 3rd grade. She shared her fruit snacks with him at lunch. She laughed at his jokes, even the really dumb ones. She had a pet guinea pig named Gizmo. She's just cool, he finished, a dreamy look on his face. And when I'm around her, my stomach feels funny. Like I'm on a roller coaster. But a good roller coaster. I smiled, remembering that feeling all too well. That's a very classic sign, Leo. His expression turned serious again. But how do I know if it's forever? Like you and great-grandpa Frank? Oh, the weight of that question. The beautiful, impossible weight of it. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't trivialize his feelings, but I also couldn't let an 8-year-old believe he had to find his forever person in the 3rd grade. Leo, look at me, I said. He did. What you're feeling for Chloe is real and it's wonderful. It's one of the most wonderful feelings in the world. But, forever, is a very, very long time. You don't have to know that right now. He looked confused. But you knew with great-grandpa Frank. I thought I knew, I corrected gently. And I was right, but I was also much older. The pieces of my puzzle had more time to show themselves. Your puzzle with Chloe, you're just starting it. Right now, you just have to focus on being a good friend to her. Share your fruit snacks back. Laugh at her jokes. Be kind. That's how you start building the puzzle, piece by piece. You don't have to see the whole picture yet. He seemed to ponder this, his little mind working hard to reconcile the grand, epic love story I'd told him with the simple, schoolyard reality of his own feelings. So, being a good friend is the first piece? He asked. It's the very best first piece there is, I said firmly. Everything else, the forever stuff, that comes later, if it's supposed to. He nodded slowly, a look of dawning understanding on his face. The tension seemed to drain from his small shoulders. He hadn't been looking for a guarantee of forever, he'd been looking for a roadmap, for permission to feel what he was feeling without the pressure of a lifetime commitment. Thanks, Grandma, he said, leaning his head against my arm. You're the smartest person I know. I wrapped my arm around him, pulling him close. And you, my dear Leo, are one of the most wonderful boys I know. Any girl would be lucky to have you as a friend. We sat like that for a while longer, watching the sunset. The conversation drifted to other things, his upcoming science project on volcanoes, the new video game he was saving up for. The profound had given way to the ordinary, but the air between us was different now, charged with a new level of intimacy and trust. When Sarah's car pulled up to the curb, Leo jumped off the bench, his moment of deep philosophical inquiry seemingly replaced by a sudden urgency to tell his mom about the particularly high swing he'd managed to achieve earlier. Did you two have a good time? Sarah asked as we walked toward the car. The best, I said, meeting Leo's eyes. He gave me a small, secret smile. Yeah, he agreed. Grandma helped me with a project. Back at home, after they had driven away, the silence of my house felt different. It wasn't just the comfortable quiet of an old woman's routine anymore. It was a silence full of echoes of Frank's laughter, of Sarah's childhood giggles, and now, the echo of my grandson's earnest, world-altering question. I walked back to the wall of photographs and stood before the picture of Frank in his uniform. I traced the glass over his young, hopeful face. You'll never believe it, Frank, I whispered to the smiling soldier. Our grandson. He's asking the big questions. I thought he just wanted to visit his grandma. I thought it was a simple Tuesday about cookies and cartoons. But my grandson had surprised me. He had handed me a key, not just to his own tender, emerging heart, but to a door in my own past I hadn't opened in a long time. By asking me to define my forever, he had made me relive it, remember the texture and color of it, and in doing so, he had given it back to me, fresh and vibrant and real. He hadn't just been looking for answers about Chloe. In his own innocent, profound way, he had been asking how to live a life of love. And in answering him, I had remembered how I had lived mine. The surprise wasn't just the question, it was the gift of remembrance it bestowed. It was the stunning realization that our stories, our loves, are not locked in the past. They are living, breathing things, passed down like the most precious of heirlooms, ready to guide a new generation, one beautiful, complicated, heartfelt question at a time. And as I stood there in the quiet, I felt not old, but timeless, a link in a glorious, unbreakable chain of love.